Why is America moving towards a wartime economy? Why are the Democrats so supportive of this war? And the answer has to do with empire. So this is something called the National Defense Strategy that came out in January 2026. And this is the blueprint for how the Pentagon will fight wars for the next 5 to 10 years. This is a strategy behind the Iran war. All right, and so what we're going to do is we're going to read certain parts together to analyze how the Americans will strategize about the world moving forward. Okay, so certain things to keep in mind, okay? Concrete interest first means that we have to think about resources. We have to think about concrete advantages to America. We can no longer think about ideals, okay? Second is the idea of rules-based international order, or the globalists. Before America was fighting wars for their nations, or for Europe, or for Japan, we have to fight wars for America, okay? And the last thing is the idea of undermine our warriors' ethos, okay? Undermine our warrior ethos. What this means is that before, America was bounded by too many rules, okay? What we call rules of engagement, okay? Or basically avoiding war crimes. You were not allowed to kill civilians. You needed permission from the United Nations to fight wars. And what this is saying is like, screw that, okay? Screw rules of engagement. We should just fight wars to win wars. That means we kill as many people as we need. That means we do whatever is necessary in order to win wars, okay? This is what the first paragraph is saying here. It's a new vision of American power. Before, it was about ideals. Now it's about interests. Before, it was about globalism. Now it's about America first. Before, it was about rules of engagement. Now it's about the warrior ethos, okay? Please continue reading, Ivory.
President Trump has decisively changed that, courageously putting Americans first to truly make America great once again. Under his leadership, the United States has the world's strongest, most lethal, and most capable military. Indeed, the most powerful military that this world has ever seen. No longer will the department be distracted by interventionism, endless wars, regime changes, and nation building. Instead, we will put our people's practical, concrete interests first. We will support a policy of actual peace through strength. We will be the sword and shield to deter war with the goal of peace, but ready to fight and win the nation's necessary wars if called upon.
So the important sentence here is, we will support a policy of actual peace through strength. What this means is that we will be so mighty, we will be so invincible, we will be so fearless that we will instill fear in others. They'll be so afraid to fight us, and therefore we'll have peace, okay? So it's the idea of hegemony. Peace through might. Peace through power. We have to demonstrate we are invincible. When people fear us, that's when people will obey us. When people obey us, that's when we'll have peace, okay?
This does not mean isolationism. To the contrary, it means a focused and genuinely strategic approach to the threats our nation faces and how to best manage them. This approach is based on a flexible, practical realism that looks at the world in a clear-eyed way, which is essential for serving Americans' interests. As the national security strategy articulates, this is the common-sense approach President Trump has advanced.
Okay, all right. So this does not mean isolationism. It's about how to best manage them. So the idea here is that America before was engaging too many wars overseas. It was too spread out. America will now be focused on maintaining and protecting its core strategic interests. That means divide and conquer, okay? Divide and rule, okay? I'll explain this as we go on. All right, so these are the four strategic interests of the United States, okay? Can you read, Ivory?
We will defend the homeland and ensure that our interests in the Western Hemisphere are protected. We will deter China in the Indo-Pacific through strength and not confrontation. We will increase burden sharing with allies and partners around the world. And we will rebuild the U.S. defense industrial base as part of the President's once-in-a-century revival of American industry.
Okay, so this is it, okay? This is the plan moving forward. And already we're seeing the Americans are doing this. All right, so rebuild the U.S. defense industrial base, okay, basically means factories and resources, right? Making sure that America becomes the arsenal of democracy. its factories produce all the weapons America needs in order to protect its interests as well as protect its allies. We will increase burden sharing with allies and partners around the world, okay? This basically means that from now on, we're not friends. From now on, we're the boss and you do what we tell you to do, okay? From now on, we will order Japan, South Korea, Europe, NATO to do what they must in order to protect our power, and they must follow us. Basically, create a system of vassalage. That's number 2. Number 3 is we will deter China in the interest of strength, not confrontation. We don't want to destroy China. We don't want to hurt China, but we need China to obey us. And the way to do that is by containing China, strangling China economically, and also promoting Japan, okay? So in the future, China and Japan will balance each other out, and that allows us to rule over them, right? In the future, we America will sell resources, weapons, and financing to both China and Japan as they compete against each other in East Asia. That's how we will contain China. And then the idea of we'll defend the homeland and ensure that our interests in the Western Hemisphere are protected, okay? So basically, this means that the Western Hemisphere belongs to America. We'll do whatever we want in the Western Hemisphere. If you want to come to the Western Hemisphere, you need our permission. If you, China or Russia, you want to come into the Western Hemisphere, you have to get our permission. You have to pay a tax to us, okay? This is really important. Defend the homeland. Defend the homeland just basically means a police state. Before, America was too free, and therefore America was too weak. The example is the Vietnam War. When the war was not lost in Vietnam, the war was lost at home because you had too many people, too many young men protesting on the streets, too many rebels. If we want to win wars, if we want to project strength, if we want to create peace in the world, we need to make sure that our home front is secure, all right? And that means making sure that Americans follow the law, do what they're told, okay? So I'll explain this more as we go along. All right, so now let's move on to China, okay? So can you read, Ivory?
Deter China in the Indo-Pacific through strength, not confrontation. President Trump seeks a stable peace, fair trade, and respectable relations with China, and he has shown that he is willing to engage President Xi Jinping directly to achieve those goals. But President Trump has also shown how important it is to negotiate from a position of strength, and he has tasked DOW accordingly. Consistent with the president's approach, DOW will therefore seek and open a wider range of military-to-military communications with the People's Liberation Army, with a focus on supporting strategic stability with Beijing, as well as deconfliction and de-escalation more generally. But we will also be clear-eyed and realistic about the speed, scale, and quality of China's historic military buildup. Our goal in doing so is not to dominate China, nor is it to strangle or humiliate them. Rather, our goal is simple: to prevent anyone, including China, from being able to dominate us or our allies. In essence, to set the military condition required to achieve the NSS goal of a balance of power in the Indo-Pacific that allows all of us to enjoy a decent peace. To that end, as the NSS directs, we will erect a strong denial defense along the first island chain. We will also urge and enable key regional allies and partners to do more for our collective defense. In doing so, we will reinforce deterrence by denial so that all nations recognize their interests are best served through peace and restraint.
Okay, so again, this is a very clear plan, okay? What this is saying is this: we're going to negotiate with China, we're going to be friends, we have to do so from a position of strength. And so what does that mean? First of it means that we will embargo China, okay? How can we embargo China? Through the first island chain, right? The first island chain is Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, right? So if you embargo China, it means China cannot access the Strait of Malacca, which provides China with 80% of its energy needs, right? And so if you embargo China, China has no choice but to obey you. You're negotiating from a position of strength. The other thing is that we're going to enable key regional allies. And this of course, would be Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, right? And this creates the Strait of Malacca. We will have these nations challenge Chinese supremacy in order to create balance, a power balance in East Asia. And once this power balance is created, they all depend on us, the United States, because we have energy, we have food, we have weapons, we have financing, okay? So again, if you just read this, it's very, very clear what the United States wants to do, and they're already doing it. All right, so this is the conclusion, okay? Aubrey, can you read, please?
Taking our nation from the precipice of a world war just a year ago, President Trump is now leading our nation into a new golden age, one defined by putting Americans first in a common sense, pragmatic, and concrete way. No longer will we squander Americans' will, resources, and even lives in foolish and grandiose adventures abroad. But we will not retreat. Rather, we will unabashedly prioritize Americans' concrete interests with an approach of flexible realism. We will restore the warrior ethos. We will refocus the American military on its core, irreplaceable goal of winning the nation's wars decisively. In doing so, as President Trump has so memorably emphasized, our purpose will not be aggression or perpetual war. Rather, our goal is peace. Peace is the highest good, but not a peace that sacrifices our people's security, freedoms, and prosperity. Rather, a peace that Americans deserve, a noble and proud peace. Fortunately, this peace is compatible with the interests of our potential opponents if they keep their demands reasonable and cabined. We do not demand their humiliation or submission. Rather, we demand only that they respect our reasonably conceived interests and those of our allies and partners who stand stoutly with us. If we all can acknowledge this, we can achieve a flexible and sustainable balance of power among us and peace. But we at the Department of War will be ready if our gracious offer is spurned. We know that wishing for a decent peace is not the same thing as bringing it about. Thus, if our potential opponents are unwise enough to reject our peaceful overtures and choose conflict instead, America's armed force will stand ready to fight and win the nation's wars in ways that make sense for Americans. To ensure that this is the case, the strategy will ensure that we see things and the choices we need to make clearly. We will prioritize addressing the most consequential and grave threats to Americans' interests. We will revamp our network of allies and partners to meet the threats we face. And we will be ready, always carrying the sharpest and most formidable sword, but prepared to offer the olive branch.
Okay, so this is very clear, okay? What he's saying is this: obey us and there will be peace. Defy us and there will be war. Okay, the key idea is we will prioritizing the most consequential and grave threats to Americans' interests. Okay, sorry, can you give back? Okay, so I want to show you what this means. Basically, it means that from now on, America will adopt a new strategy, okay? All right, so if this ceasefire does not work and war continues, then we can expect in round 2, the fighting will get much worse. Okay, so the Americans will start to target civilian infrastructure, including bridges, universities, reservoirs, power plants, desalination plants. Basically, it will destroy Iran's capacity to be a nation state. In response, the Iranians can destroy a lot more energy infrastructure, okay? So what it's done now, it's basically close off the Strait of Hormuz, but it can also close off the Red Sea, okay? And they can also target pipelines of natural gas. Basically, it can take offline 1/3 of the world's energy supply, and this would, of course, cause an economic depression, okay? Unfortunately, the national security strategy of the United States doesn't really care. If you just read the national security strategy, they already have factored this in and they don't really care. So the idea is to prioritize strategic interests. And what this basically means is that America has the world's greatest navy. No one else comes close. And so all that they do is contain the world's choke points. And the world must bend to the will of America. Okay, does that make sense? If you want to trade, then you must depend on American generosity. Okay, so already what's happening is that this area, it's being closed off. But America has made moves to close off other areas as well. So America is exerting more control over the Panama Canal, okay? Basically, the Western Hemisphere is under something called the Monroe Doctrine. The The Donald Doctrine basically states that America can do whatever it wants in the Western Hemisphere. If you want to come here and trade, you have to go through us. China depends on a lot of resources from the Western Hemisphere, especially from South America. All right? Over here is something called the Lithium Triangle. This is Venezuela. Brazil provides China with a lot of agricultural products. Soybeans, basically. And what Trump is saying is that, hey, in the future, you're going to trade over here, China, you have to go through us, okay? So he's basically embargoing the Western Hemisphere from China. Over here is something called the Strait of Malacca. This is the most important choke point in the world, especially for East Asia, because as you can see, the Middle East, if it is to access South Korea, China, and Japan, it has to go through the Strait of Malacca. But guess what, guys? Everything goes through the Strait of Malacca. And this is important because the United States has signed a deal with Indonesia. So what we can expect is that America and Indonesia, their militaries will have to cooperate more and more. This is and the reason why is America is moving towards creating the first island chain. Basically, in militarizing the first island chain in order to deter China, to embargo China, basically. What we're also seeing is that Japan is now rapidly remilitarizing. They're signing more agreements with Australia and other nations, okay? They're building more weapons. This is all being encouraged by the United States as a deterrent to China. Again, this is really important. America does not want to destroy China. It does not want to humiliate China. It wants to control China. Because the Chinese economy is still strong and powerful, and America wants to make sure that the Chinese are buying more US dollars, okay? So it is entirely possible what's going to happen is that the Chinese will have no choice but to buy from America, okay? Especially energy. The entire Western Hemisphere belongs to America, and you want to trade with the Western Hemisphere, then you need to sign a trade deal with America, okay? What America is also doing that's really important is that it's planning to take over Greenland, okay? By taking over Greenland, you're blocking access. China and Russia cannot access the Western Hemisphere, okay, through the Arctic. You're also seizing control over the Arctic, okay? And there are lots of minerals and oil in the Arctic as well. The Strait of Gibraltar is also another strategic choke point, and America has signed a deal with Morocco to enhance more cooperation. Okay, so I can see what America is doing is when they mean strategic interest, prioritizing strategic interest, what they mean is exerting control over the world's choke points so that they can control global trade. Okay? They're not going to control the entire ocean because it's much too big, but if they control certain choke points like the Middle East, and the Strait of Malacca, that's probably enough. Okay? They'll get China to submit. The point is to control China, not to destroy China. All right, this is important because if you want to become a major power in the world, you need to trade effectively. Russia has something called the North-South corridor. As you can see, it runs through Iran, okay? Iran is very important for the Russian North-South corridor, and that's why the United States is attacking Iran. Okay? And that's why the United States is not going to ever stop attacking Iran. Because as long as Iran is at peace, Russia will rule the world. But if Iran is being destroyed, there's too much war, this entire region is blocked off from both Russia and China, okay? Russia has something called the Belt and Road Initiative. As you can see, okay, from a map, the center of the Belt and Road Initiative is, of course, Iran, all right? If China wants to access Africa, Europe, the Middle East, it has to go through Iran. Or it goes through the sea, the Strait of Malacca. But as I already said, the next step for America is to close off the Strait of Malacca as well to Chinese trade. Then where do you go? Well, then you go over to the Western Hemisphere, but that's American territory, okay? Yes, you can trade with Russia. You can trade with Russia. You can do that, but it's not enough for your economy. Doesn't make sense. Right now, China gets about 20% of its oil from Russia. Maybe Russia can provide 30% or 40%. at most. That's very optimistic. But where are you gonna get the other 50%, 60%, okay? Your options are very limited. If war can't give you any oil, then you're forced to buy from the United States, okay? If you're forced to buy from the United States can set the price. It can set terms. It can to you. And what the United States will say, you have to buy in US dollars. That's their economy, right? Does it make sense, guys? This is not a hard idea to understand. This is exactly what it says in the US national security strategy, okay? So, in ways, you can make the argument that what's happening around the world right now, it's all an American policy of containing China, where in these flags are US military bases. As you can see, China is completely surrounded by US military bases in Japan, in South Korea, in Taiwan, even in Indonesia and Malaysia. China, Philippines, China's completely surrounded, okay? And this is it, the Strait of Malacca. This is a major choke point. And as you can see, it's not that hard for America to cut off that choke point, right? You see how much trade goes through the Strait of Malacca? You can see how many US bases are here. And you can see a lot of this trade goes to the Middle East, but hey, guess what? The Middle East is at war right now, so no more oil, no more energy, no more LNG from the Middle East. So you might go to Angola, but this is very important. The Americans have recently announced a naval blockade in the Indian Ocean, okay? So that's cut off your route as well. So if you're China, yes, you could rely on Russia, but you see how little this is, okay? There's too little trade between Russia and China, and you could build it up, but it's gonna take you 10, 20 years time. And what do you do for the next 10 years, right? Your people need food to eat, you need energy to fuel your factories. And so the next 10 years, you have no choice but to work with the United States. And that's what Trump means by negotiating from a position of strength. Because you can set terms. You can force China to accept whatever terms you want. And quite honestly, if you just look at this map, there's very little that China can do about it, okay? There's this war in the Middle East. There's also this war in Russia, which also absorbs a lot of Russian energy. So Russia doesn't have that much resources to spare to China anyway. But America does, the Western Hemisphere does. Okay, because the Western Hemisphere is at peace. So as long as the Western Hemisphere maintains a fortress, okay? Meaning no one can attack the Western Hemisphere, then the Western Hemisphere can continue to supply resources to the world at war. So this is what the war is about, guys, okay? It's about creating conflict in the world so the United States can maintain its empire. And the way it maintains its empire is by maintaining its control over global trade, okay?